Our next story of the day is titled, Would you name the baby something that your partner doesn't like? Even if he can't come up with anything he likes himself, I am 100% set on a name, but he's not a fan and he doesn't really like any names. And then she says, help me. I think that people put a little bit too much weight into the name, and I completely get it. Of course, you will only have so many children. Both parties do have to agree on a name, and you want that name to be something that you like, that you're happy to say every day, I guess, and that you also think will be good for your child as they're growing up and so on. So there's kind of a lot that goes into a name. In a way, we identify very intensely with it. Obviously, it's one of the it's a kind of a key part of your identity. And so people approach it with this way of like, oh my God, I have to pick the perfect name. I don't think there is such a thing as the perfect name. There are some pretty cringe names out there. So maybe don't name your baby something that will make you cringe. But actually, you kind of tend to get used to the vast majority of names. And you'll see in the comments here, some people have pretty hilarious names for their kids, in my opinion, anyway. If I had this type of experience and had this kind of conflict, I would probably say maybe take a step back. This point of I'm 100% set on a name is just unnecessary. Do not be 100% set on a name that your partner doesn't like, because both of you should agree on the name. And if you can't agree on the name, you should at least be able to compromise as adults to say, okay, maybe this time you can name this child, and if you have a second child, then I'll name him or her. So this is one of those situations where you have to be grown up enough to have the conversation. You have to name your kid something. So you have to agree on something. The second part of this, even if he can't come up with anything he likes himself, I would probably I have this image in my head, and maybe I'm projecting, but this is kind of how it was in my relationship with my husband, where I would sit there and I would, because going through names was a fun exercise for me. So I would sit there and I'd open up a page with 100 boy names or 100 girl names, and then we would just go through them, and I would read out anything that I thought was either especially funny or maybe kind of decent, and then he would react. And I can see your husband kind of being like, or your partner being like, nah, I don't like that one. I don't like that one. I don't like that one. But if you, as the mother in this situation, of the person that's taking control of the whole process and the whole situation, and you're really stressed out about trying to find the perfect name, then I can also see why that would turn him off a bit. So maybe you can try to approach that a little bit differently. Maybe you can both have the same list of names and you can go through it together, and he has to select 5 and you have to select 5, and then you go through them and you rank them. Like maybe you can try and work through it in a different way, try to approach the conversation in a different way, in a way that involves both of you, rather than one person saying, hey, I want to name my kid this, and the other person saying, nah, which is not very great. That's how I would approach it if I had this particular situation. Quite a lot of people here do say, as the first comment says, no, a name should be something that you both agree on. Sometimes it's harder for one person to find a name they love, but this is my 4th kid and I would never name her something that her father would hate. And I completely agree with that. I think that's kind of awful if you end up going for a name that one partner really, really, really doesn't like. That's not cool. That said, there are a couple of people who seem to make this compromise willfully. So the next comment says, my husband is a junior and our baby is going to be a 3rd. I don't like the name, but it's really special to my husband, so I'm going with it. He doesn't really get to experience the things that I'm going through, so I wanted to do something special for him. And I think that's awesome and sweet, so long as you don't have any bitterness or resentment or any leftover regret associated with that. If you really do accept, okay, you know what, I'm completely fine with this, then I think that's great. Some of the hilarious responses that people have to this. I mean, one person says that our son is named after my husband, his father, but we just changed the middle name. I was not a fan of reusing a name or having a junior, but I couldn't come up with a name that I loved, so I just went with it. I can't imagine his name being anything else now, and it fits him perfectly. So she says, it may be worth waiting and seeing the baby and calling the baby the name that you want, and then maybe it will grow on your husband. I do think that the husband has to go, okay, yeah, sure, for this to happen. But this is kind of the point that I was making. In the majority of cases, you get used to the names that you use for people, and then you start associating them with those people. And then you can't really imagine using a different name for them because that's how you've always known them. So this is one of those one of those situations where that could happen, but I do think that the husband still has to fundamentally agree. This I find hysterical. My husband is a third, and the name is important to him. And while I'm not particularly a fan of it, it is important to him. We call him Ivy for four, like the Roman four. And one person replies to that saying, my 16-month-old is a fourth. His grandfather calls him Quad. I'd find this hilarious. This is the funniest name that I've ever heard. I would probably not be okay with that, but you know what? Cool names are cool names, I guess, for lots of people. One comment here that I think is actually quite sad is my sister-in-law named her daughter something that her husband did not want, and he still doesn't like the name, and he even calls her an alternate name. My mother-in-law tries to justify her decision, but it takes 2 people to make a baby, and he said he feels like he had no say. I kind of feel bad for him. Yeah, I don't think that that's a good situation. I think that you run the risk of having the husband in this situation, or the other partner, the person that doesn't agree with the name, being resentful in the long run. And yes, it's not it's probably not good to be resentful. Once you've named the kid, you should move on from that. You can just accept the situation as it is and move on. But it's proof of the relationship kind of breaking down a little bit, of you not being able to agree on something, you not being able to compromise, and one person overruling what the other person wants is not a good basis for a long-term, happy, committed relationship. So in general, I think names are not as complicated as they feel like they are in the moment. And yes, you should try to agree on a name as much as possible. And there's lots of ways to approach that conversation that are different from I want X name and waiting for the other person to kind of deliver a name that they like more as a result.